You people are full of crap.
Now, back to Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game.
And that's how we begin.
Felt a little personal there, Mr.
Well,
King.
you know what? If you walk into any situation in life and just say that, you're probably going to be right.
Yeah.
Like, not 100% of the time.
Well,
but
with a full
most
room
of the
for
time.
sure. I like your chances. Or a full radio studio.
Go to the Niner game Thursday and just do that to your section. Just, it could be first quarter.
Well, I'm sitting in the press box, so that actually might fit even better.
Exactly. There it is. Peter King, everybody, joining us here on Willard and Dibs every week. We love these conversations. Peter, how are you? Thanks for doing it.
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you as always. I wonder if you'd weigh in on this. We're all sitting around before the show today having a conversation after the great game by Deebo Samuel in L.A., and we were trying to come up with a comp, someone who sort of fits the unique vibe that Deebo Samuel offers in the history or certain recent history of the game. We've seen a lot of running backs who can sort of moonlight as a receiver, but not many receivers who can moonlight as a running back. Where do you sort of classify Deebo with that the uniqueness that he offers?
I don't think there's anybody in the game right now who's really similar to him. You know, it's funny, Bijan Robinson, and I'm not in any way comparing him to Deebo Samuel, but last year, I remember right before the draft, I remember having a conversation with Steve Sarkisian, the coach at Texas, and he said to me, you know, Bijan was a great running back, but he was also perhaps would have been our best wide receiver. But we had the need at running back, and so that's where he played. I have a feeling that the exact same thing would be true with Deebo. If you get 3 injuries in the backfield, I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Shanahan gave him 10 or 11 carries one game, maybe as sort of an offset back. But obviously you don't want to take away what he does best, which is to scare every cornerback in the NFL.
Are we moving to a time where more of these players will emerge? I'm thinking about Austin Eckler with the Chargers, who is a great receiving running back. He can also run it. Christian McCaffrey, Cordero Patterson when healthy. Are more teams going to look to emulate this style of flexibility offensively?
I think a lot of teams already are. You know, as John Lynch told me in training camp, you know, when they first got there, they wanted separators in the passing game, you know, as wide receivers. But he came to believe, I think wisely, that it is better to have a physical wide receiver than a burner wide receiver. And obviously, you don't want a receiver that runs 4.68, but you also want a receiver who's going to be extremely physical. And, you know, this comparison is obviously not exact, but in terms of the physical wide receiver, I think Keyshawn Johnson was one of those real physical wide receivers. I think T.O. was. There wasn't a more physical receiver than Hines Ward. But the difference is, you know, Deebo is able to double dip in the backfield and, if need be, could give a team some real snaps in the backfield. And that's what makes him special.
Peter King with us on Willard and Dibs. The wide receiver room has been much discussed, Peter, because there's almost angst there. You see a game like that where you feel like you need Deebo. The prior week, it was like, man, Brandon Aiyuk is going to be a star. And the question has come up, can they afford both? What do you see? The Niners have been so good with the cap, but what do you see going forward as far as Aiyuk and Deebo and the ability to have them both?
Well, I think there's going to come a time when you're not going to be able to sign everybody you truly want. I mean, let's look at the Philadelphia Eagles, okay? They let Miles Sanders walk this year, even though Miles Sanders was an extremely good, complete package at running back. And I think they were smart to do so for a very simple reason, that you've got to pay 2 wide receivers on that team, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. You got to pay the tight end, Dallas Goedert. You got to pay 3 offensive linemen, Kelsey and the 2 tackles. And you also, obviously, got to pay the quarterback. Now, if you look at the Niners, they have a great benefit because they got at least 2 more years now where you don't have to pay the quarterback. So that's a luxury. But the difference with the Niners versus a team like the Eagles is that they're paying a running back at the top of the running back market, and Christian McCaffrey clearly is worth the money. So I think I look at the situation and basically say that I think the 49ers each year are going to have a decision to make. And I think that's why a lot of people, not only around the team but around the league, were surprised that they invested that money in Javon Hargrave. Because if you look at it, honestly, if you look at it, it's a surprise that they spent money on him. But I think Kyle Shanahan looked at his team in 2019 and thought there were just too many formidable guys on the defensive front to block. So that's a long way of saying that I would be surprised if they were able to pay both guys at or near the top of the receiver market when the bill comes due for them. But surprised but not shocked, because I think John Lynch, Adam Peters, Parag Marathe, they do a good job understanding where everybody fits in the cap world. It's just, I'm not positive if they're going to be able to sign both of those guys.
With reworked contracts, the word is they've got $41 million now under the cap this year, and if they don't use it at the trade deadline, they carry that into next year. Does it feel like they may not have to, quote, pay the piper until 2025 when Brock Purdy eventually would come due?
Well, I think that's true, but that's different. That's a different question than saying, well, what happens whenever it is, probably next year, when they would have to pay, they would have to pony up for Aiyuk and look, I don't have their contract sheet in front of me, but it's clear that it's a different thing to say that, well, they don't really have to worry about this till 2025. Technically, maybe they don't because they have a bunch of money right now. But, it's all cap gymnastics after a while. And I think that when they signed Hargrave, they basically signed a player, an unexpected signing. And that is definitely, no matter what the numbers say right now, that's going to impact who they're able to sign long term.
Peter King is with us on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. Peter, especially because you've had so many conversations with Kyle Shanahan through the years and after games, we wondered what you thought about this comment that he made yesterday at the conference call. He was sort of asked how he tried to get better as a coach in the offseason. Take a listen to his answer, and then I want to follow up with a question for you.
See what to add, see what fits in. Spend a lot of the offseason trying to study personnel to add in the draft or personnel to add in free agency. Those are the biggest parts, as a coach, that you try to do to make your team better, is to try to help out and see who you can add to it to make it better. Sometimes those are real tough decisions that we all spend a lot of time working on. And then my biggest thing is trying to relax a little bit more in the offseason, because I've learned how long of a grind the season is and how long it goes and how much you got to get up for each week. And I really try to get mentally stronger with books and some self-help type things. So when you go into the season, you're ready to go.
I was fascinated by him saying that, he tried to calm himself down, read some self-help books. He's so formulaic with the way he goes about building a team and calling plays. What do you see? What is still out there with regard to how Kyle Shanahan can improve?
Well, I think the one thing that he has done over this is 7th year as a head coach. I think the one thing he has done is he's been able to sort of diagnose himself. And by that I mean, it's clear that Kyle is an anal guy in terms of, he can't let a lot of things go. There's a lot of little things that he wants to make sure he has control of. And I think anytime I hear a guy like Kyle Shanahan say, I tried to relax a little bit more in the off season, I stand up and clap, because this business, in my opinion, is unduly, ridiculously, 80 hours a week, even sometimes in the off season. And in my opinion, I think that a lot of these guys who do this job and who are great at it don't realize sometimes the damage they're doing to themselves physically and mentally, because they essentially are possessed by this job. And it goes back to Joe Gibbs sleeping in the office 4 days a week and all that other stuff. It's just not the right way to live. And again, look, far be it from me. I don't do that job, so I don't understand everything that it takes. But I think at some point, if you burn the candle too strongly at one end, it's really going to affect your life, your personal life, and your health at the other end. So good for Kyle Shanahan in saying that I got away from it a little bit this offseason. Applause to him.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, and we're talking with Peter King. Yeah,
Peter, you mentioned the word health, and you had everyone thinking about Chubb last night and all the other injuries we always see in football, and Kyle Shanahan mentioning post-game that he should have found a way to get Eli Mitchell in the game with Christian McCaffrey taking every snap at running back. How surprised were you to, one, hear him give that admission, and also to have a running back play every snap this early in the year?
I didn't even know that until you told me. I'm surprised at that because, look, Christian McCaffrey, before he got to San Francisco, had a recent history of missing a lot of games due to injury. So, in my opinion, I think Kyle Shanahan, and I think these are things that his coaches and John Lynch have to remind him of. That, listen, when you can get 12 fewer snaps in a game, if this game is over, if you can get 12 fewer snaps in a game for Christian McCaffrey, you've got to take that. And so I think it's good that he realizes that. I mean, I when I watch football now, a lot of times, like when the Giants were losing to the Cowboys 40-0 or whatever the score was late in that Week 1 game, and Daniel Jones is in there, and the Cowboys are teeing off on him. I said, why in the world is this happening? It's not smart. And so I'm glad to hear Shanahan say that. He should say that. And in my opinion, it's better if you can figure out a way during the course of the year to have Christian McCaffrey play the equivalent of 14 or 15 games, with taking a bunch of snaps off when you can get him those breathers.
Peter, we have already taken a look at your way too early power rankings and see that the Dallas Cowboys occupy the number 1 spot. You have the 49ers too, but also say quite close between them and the Philadelphia Eagles. What is it you see in Dallas right now that has them, in your mind, ahead of the 49ers?
I think the biggest thing with Dallas is that Mike McCarthy imprint on that offense has really shown up. It was a little bit controversial early in the off season when Kellen Moore essentially got dismissed, and McCarthy said he was taking over the offense and the play calling. And I've talked to Mike about this, he basically has been in every quarterback meeting so far since the start of training camp. And last year he might have been in 2/3 of them. And I think one of his big things, one of McCarthy's big deals, is that there were some mechanical things he wanted to work on with Dak Prescott, particularly in footwork mechanics, pass drop, things like that, that he felt was missing last year, particularly with Prescott. So I think that has been a real big advantage. Prescott even talked about it after the game when, they won the first two games 70-10, and he said, I think one of the ways I've improved is my footwork. And, who talks about footwork? But anyway, so I think there's that. Prescott is just better mechanically. He's not making the mistakes that he made a year ago. Look, it's been 8 quarters. You don't know what's going to happen. And I think the other thing is that Dan Quinn now knows everything about this defense, what they can do, what they can't do. And I think he's become really smart in utilizing Micah Parsons inside, outside, all over the defense, so that offensive teams cannot have a good handle on how they use, to me, what is the most disruptive defensive player in football right now, Micah Parsons.
And we are just a couple weeks away from the Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa. Well, I guess showdown's not appropriate because they won't actually face each other unless one of them turns into an offensive tackle, which would be kind of weird if it went that way. But Nick Bosa through 2 games, Peter, where do you rate his progress in terms of him missing camp and really not showing up on the stat sheet yet?
Well, I don't think it's surprising because I think even though the one thing you always know about Nick Bosa is that he's an insane worker and that it isn't like he's going to show up and not be ready to play. He's going to be ready to play, but if you haven't actually played, it's different to say, well, I'm ready to play, than, if you haven't gone at it with, with tackles, and if you haven't done those drills at all, and you haven't really been physically imposed upon for 8 months, it's going to take a little while to get back, I think, into being the kind of player that you want to be. Now, having said all that, I think that Nick Bosa has been impactful, but I think that there will be another level of impact that he can make, particularly when you're facing teams that understand it, because right now, clearly, first 2 weeks, people have been very conscious of Nick Bosa, and he's left opportunities for other guys on that defense to make plays. And so I don't think that's going to continue unabated, and I think Bosa is definitely going to have his chance to, to make plays more and more as the weeks come on. But I also think that he makes other guys on his defense better just by his mere presence. So I don't look at this team and say, man, they really need to get better stats out of Nick Bosa. He'll be great and impactful in his own way, even if it doesn't show up on the stat sheet.
Peter King with us, Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. Peter, maybe this is a stupid sports radio thing with, quarterback power rankings and whatnot, but we're watching football last night, and I got to think the Browns are bummed out with what they're getting from Deshaun Watson. The Broncos bummed out with what they're getting from Russell Wilson, and then even beyond, some of the younger guys, maybe it's too early, but Kenny Pickett has not maybe taken the step that people thought he would. When you look at Brock Purdy, I think it's time to remove sample size. I see this guy as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Are you comfortable putting him there yet? What do you think?
I don't look. Here's the way I look at Brock Purdy, and it's why I totally agree with Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson has been a crushing disappointment. And everybody who thought, well, last year, last year, basically, Deshaun Watson had 6 games of reacclimating himself to football. Well, he has not improved one iota in the first 2 games of this season over last year. I don't even know if he's been as good this off season early this season as he was last year. So, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the Browns have to be questioning themselves right now with Deshaun Watson. And as far as Brock Purdy goes, look, however many starts he's had, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes, we want to say that a guy is X, Y, and Z, and we've made this judgment, and he is this. I just don't think he's played enough yet. I don't think he's played enough yet for me to say that he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. All I know is that if I have to win a game right now, today, this week, he would be among the top 10 quarterbacks I would pick to win a game.
That's a great way to break it down. I mean,
like that.
Sample size aside, this week, he's got a pretty good chance against the Giants team who has their quarterback, I said with a question mark. What do you think the Giants feel? How should they feel about Daniel Jones being their guy who, hasn't been terrific, but they've inked him to a pretty significant deal?
What can you do? They had to invest in him in the off season, and when they invested in him, I think he, in essence, has been about what they would have expected. And, he was great in the second half the other day. He won that game pretty much all by himself. But again, Daniel Jones is a good football player. And I think one of the things that is difficult to do in the way we grade and look at football players is we want to take every week and say, okay, where is this guy right now? You got to let him play. It's like, just let Brock Purdy play another month and then let's have this discussion. You got to do it over and over and over again if you're going to be really great in football. And right now, 2 weeks is just not, in my opinion, a big enough sample size. Like, I would want to say right now, I'd be petrified if I were the Cleveland Browns right now about Deshaun Watson. But again, I still think you got to let him play another 6 or 8 weeks to try to get out of this funk that he's in right now. And we'll see if he can. But just the same way as I am very bullish right now on Brock Purdy, I would be very worried right now about Deshaun Watson. But they both have time to, both if you're Purdy, to burnish his reputation, and if you're Deshaun Watson, to change the reputation.
Fair way to say it, for sure. Absolutely. Peter, great stuff as always. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week.
All the best, guys. Thank you.
All right, that's
Thanks,
Peter
Peter.
King, Football Morning in America, NBC, one of the best out there. Peter King every week on Willard and Dibs.